Good afternoon. This is the regular meeting of the Land Development and Transportation Committee of the Louisville Metro Planning Commission. The purpose of the Land Development and Transportation Committee is to review the technical aspects of a proposed development. It is most helpful to this committee if comments and requests are related to specific issues that are technical in nature, for example, traffic, topographical features, drainage and stormwater, parking, orientation or location of structures, and other similar items. This meeting is not a public hearing. Cases which require a public hearing before the full Planning Commission will be reviewed by this committee, and when technical issues have been fully addressed, this committee will set a date for a public hearing. Additional notice of a full public hearing will be sent in accordance with state statute and adopted policies. Copies of staff comments on cases to be considered as well as speaker forms are located on the back table. For those who wish to address the committee on any case today, please fill out a form and bring it forward before the case is called. We request that you silence your cell phones and that the audience maintain silence so that the commissioners can hear the presentations and discussions on the cases before them. Because of the acoustics in this room, we ask that conversations occur in the lobby. We thank you for your cooperation. The members of the Land Development and Transportation Committee that are present today are Jeff Brown and Chief Rich Carlson and myself, Marilyn Lewis. Rob Peterson and Ruth Daniels are absent. If there are those that have speaker forms that wish to speak today on any of the cases, please go ahead and bring those forward as we continue with our agenda. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the June 13th, 2019 LD&T minutes. Those present at that meeting were myself, Rob Peterson, Rich Carlson, and Jeff Brown. Are there any changes or edits to those minutes?
Madam Chairman, I move approval of the minutes from the June 13th, 2019 meeting of the Land Development Transportation Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a properly made motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Brown,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
and Lewis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first item on our agenda today under new business is 19SUBDIV1001. This is a street name change. The project is Fisk Court street name change. The location is Fisk Court between Roy Wilkins Avenue and South 10th Street. The applicant is the Louisville Metro Housing Authority. And that doesn't look like Jay Luckett. Lacey Gabbard is our case manager.
Jay's out today, and I'm presenting him for him.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing it up there. Is it this?
It's the wrong LD&T.
Oh. Hello. There we go. Lacey Gabbard, Planning and Design Services, 444 South 5th Street. I'm presenting this on behalf of Jay Luckett. The applicant is proposing to rename the recently recorded right-of-way Fisk Court. They're asking to rename it Fisk Street. My understanding is that the right-of-way was recorded in a plat book from earlier this year as Fisk Street, and it's not been constructed yet. It is part of Beecher Terrace, the new development. So today we are scheduling the case to be heard at Planning Commission by consent agenda, business session, or public hearing. Are there any questions for me? I'll try to answer.
Questions, Chief?
Wouldn't this be more of a street type change rather than street name change? Because all we're going is from court to street, and court and street are street type designations, whereas Fisk is the actual street name, and that portion is not changing. And I think such things like that can be handled administratively by somebody else.
So this was part of the Beecher Terrace redevelopment in Russell, and it was recorded as Fisk Court, and it was determined by the Housing Authority in Metro that it would need to go through a street name change because the plat shows that it is court instead of street.
The
And
court is
addressing.
a type of,
I understand why it's confusing, but staff between the Housing Authority determined that it needed a street name change because of the recent recording of the plat
okay.
to correct that error.
And when you get down to it, you really cannot, if that's the same street, you cannot have a court street. It's all got to be the same designator. Now, if that was a separate street that ran off of that was a dead end, it would be that. And again, me back in the old fire days, we did a whole lot of things with addressing of streets and whatever back when it was a Jefferson County ordinance. But, I mean, it's no big deal, I guess, but that's what you think is the best way, but I believe would also work using 6.3.5M.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and continue with the street name change process to
Okay.
make sure it just gets done completely.
Any other questions for staff? No? Anyone else here to speak on this case? Okay, so our choice is either public hearing or consent agenda. Jeff?
I'm okay with consent agenda.
Yeah.
Yes, I am too. So I guess we need a motion to put it on the consent agenda for
July 18th.
July 18th.
Madam Chair, in regard to case well, I suppose I might be jumping the gun without asking if there's anybody here who wants to speak about it.
Oh, I already did ask if anyone
I'm
wanted to
sorry.
speak. No one indicated they did or had signed up to.
Madam Chairman, in regard to case streets, 19 Streets 10007, I move that we place this matter on the consent agenda for the July 18th Planning Commission hearing based on the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, properly made motion and second. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Brown,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
and Lewis.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is 19 Dev Plan 1082. It's a request for a revised detailed district development plan. Project name is Evansville Teachers Federal Credit Union, 2300 High Wickham Place. And Lacey Gabbard is the case manager.
Madam Chairman, excuse me, I'm
Yes.
told this is a DRC case because you could have a different result if it's not a unanimous approval. Go ahead, please.
Lacey Gabbard, 444 South 5th Street. This is 19 Dev Plan 1082 at 2300 High Wickham Place. It's for the Evansville Teachers Federal Credit Union. It's a revised detailed district development plan. So basically here we have Old Henry Road. And the applicant is proposing a one-story, 6,800 square foot bank with a drive-through. Their entrance is here off Terraview Trail and over here off the side street, which is High Wickham Place. Two entrances here. This road continues over to the rest of the development. Pretty straightforward case, just a development plan. Unless there are any questions for staff.
Questions, commissioners?
We don't have to change any of the general plan binding elements for this one, correct? It's just for the site.
Right.
Okay, is that all the questions for staff? We'll hear from the applicant.
Good afternoon. Kent Goody with Mendel Scott, 5151 Jefferson Boulevard, 40219. I have, as we get through this, I have Stacy Shord with Evansville Teachers Credit Union and the architect, Russ Frederick, if you guys have any questions, we get into this.
Okay.
Basically, asking for approval for the revised detailed district development plan for the credit union here. It's normally, like Mr. Carroll said, that normally we the DRC. We had spent a little time discussing parking on this project, so we basically needed to get the plan approved and not wait till the 17th of July for a DRC. I think that's the next DRC or later. So anyway, we need to move forward our construction plans so we can hit the construction season correctly. The northern road here, our access road will serve the hotel on the east, or sorry, the west, and then we have our other two access points that really just will serve the bank. The only binding element that maybe need to be revised is number 10 on the proposed, because I'm not sure that really relates to the site any longer, because there's no parking within Terraview, but we are providing access to the adjacent property, and they do have their own parking. They don't need any additional parking. It can stay if it causes too much heartache. I just thought maybe we might want to correct that, since it doesn't. I don't think it applies any longer. The only other request I would have would be is if we could just let the staff landscape architect know, since we're under kind of a budget or a time crunch, let staff landscape architect know she can go ahead and review the landscape plan after today's hearing if we receive approval. Do you guys have any questions?
Questions?
Yes, ma'am. That binding element that you're talking about, is there any harm in leaving it there?
I don't think there is. We have an access, Terraview's access easement down here has already been granted, and then this access easement has been granted that connects all the way over to the Zaxby's there on Old Henry. So, it's fine leaving it there, as long as no one tries to enforce it.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm trying to think about is you never know what the future might bring, and there may be a change in everything where having that binding element in place may be a good thing.
Sure.
So,
Do you have anything to add? No? All right. Is there anyone else here to speak on this case in support, opposition, or other? Okay. Chief?
I'm happy.
You happy with it? Jeff?
Yeah, I think the plan's fine.
Madam Chairman, in regard to case 19 Dev Plan 1082, I move that we approve the revised detailed district development plan to include the binding elements as shown in the staff report, the proposed site binding elements, and I base that on the staff report and testimony we've heard today.
Second?
Okay, properly made motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote?
Brown,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
and Lewis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And then where's this one go? Just with the. Okay, the next case on our agenda is 18 Zone 1071. It's a change in zoning from R4 to R6, multifamily residential and commercial neighborhood. Project name is 6875 South Hirschburn Parkway, which is also the location address Cayman Investments is the owner, and Joel Dock is the case manager.
Good afternoon, Joel Dock, Planning and Design Services staff. This is 18 Zone 1071. It's a change in zoning from R4 and R5 single-family residential to R6 multifamily residential and CM commercial neighborhood. So the frontage of the property with the 2 commercial buildings that's proposed, it's about 4.5 acres proposed to go to commercial neighborhood. And then the rear of the site, the majority of the land is proposed for R6 multifamily development. So the subject site is located about a mile southwest of Bardstown Road along South Hurstbourne property. It abuts R4 and R6 zoning districts. So R4 abuts on the eastern side with some R6 abutting on the western side. The development has proposed and will provide stub connections to adjacent development, specifically here on Downs Farm. I think it's Downs Farm Way that stubs into the property on the western side. There's a binding element with respect to the renderings and elevations, as they have not been provided for the commercial development. That the renderings will be provided and reviewed and approved by Planning and Design Services staff prior to any building permits being released on this site if it doesn't come back for any revisions. Additionally, the site is within the Highview neighborhood plan area, and I've listed specific applicable guidelines from the Highview plan in this project, beginning at the bottom of page 1 and continuing through page 3. More discussion on the compliance with the Highview neighborhood plan will be considered at the public hearing in the staff's Planning Commission staff report. Otherwise, the proposal is in order and ready for the next available public hearing before the Planning Commission. Any questions for staff?
Go ahead.
They're proposing 304 multifamily units, so they're fulfilling the 2 connection point requirement. They have the 2 separate access points. I'm asking.
Yeah, they have one on. Anything over 199 dwellings is going to require 2 access points. So they will have an access point to Hurstbourne Parkway and an access point through the adjacent condominium development, which enters out onto Hurstbourne from Vessels. But
that requires them to go through the private parking lot for the commercial development?
There's an easement for access.
It's not shown on the plan.
So the connection is here, and that stubs into the connection from the adjacent development. I believe there is a requirement in the binding elements for reciprocal access, so binding element 2H, reciprocal
So it would be just a
access.
crossover agreement.
Yeah, reciprocal access and crossover easement agreement for 6410 Downs Farm Way. So if you recall in the discussions about that Downs Farm Way, I believe eventually, after wanting a public road and then trying to get the private easement, I think we settled on the reciprocal and cross access through the parking lot being an acceptable means of connectivity.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with the connection through the parking lot. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and I believe that was a category that might have been a Category 3 development plan.
Oh, you're talking about on the one.
Yeah,
next door.
on
yes.
the Downs Farm, this development in here.
Is there a certain time that connection has to be made? From what I'm saying is it has to, have this form and that form, but it doesn't say it needs to be done by.
No, this connection is required, and it's part of the proposed development plan. So it's not a future connection; it's a proposed connection to the adjacent development. If there's any concern about the number of dwelling units being built before this connection, I might suggest a binding element that says prior to the 200th or 199th binding element being made, 2 access points shall be made available, or connection to Downs Farm Way shall be provided. So that's always an option.
Are you aware of anything that might stand in the way of those connections?
Downs Farm Way has a stub and has an easement, and the binding element requires them to provide an easement. So not providing that connection would violate the binding elements. And then we have the enforcement mechanism of those binding elements. They've also got stub connections here to vacant properties and here through private access easement, and that's to provide for the facilitation of any continuation of Ferndale Road, which is further to the east of the subject site.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good afternoon, Ashley Bartley with QK4 1046 East Chestnut Street, 40204. And we are here today to rezone this property. Part of it is, Joel said R5, it's actually R6, this little corner up here. And the rest is R4 to R6 and CN zoning. We are located on Hirschborn Parkway, just west, about a mile west of Bardstown Road. And then here's the zoning map so you can see, not that well because of the property lines, but the zoning goes essentially this way. All of this is zoned R6, and then R4 is back in here. And then here's that small sliver. Here's an aerial of the site, so you can see to the west. This is an older subdivision back in Hollow Tree, the city of Hollow Tree. And then this is Hirschborn Heights up here. That apartment complex, I've got some photos of it, is in this area up in here. And that road is already constructed. I was out there earlier this week. They're just wrapping up on their final fourth building now. And as you can see to the east are larger former agricultural lots that are undeveloped that we would assume one day will be developed. Here's the development plan. Zoning boundary, proposed zoning boundary is here, so the front would be a CN, which is the least intense commercial that is available, and the rest would be R6. And this was very deliberate based on two intermittent streams that cut through the property. We've got this front piece and then kind of segmented into two other thirds over here and then to the southwest. And when we looked at the project, we first filed a general development plan with nothing on it and only zoning lines. And Joel said, based on the high view plan, he didn't know if he would be okay with commercial. We came back with all residential, went to the neighborhood meeting and heard pretty overwhelmingly that the neighbors really wanted some kind of commercial. They have no place to go get milk or a cup of coffee or a sandwich. I did a Google directions to the closest grocery store, which is Value Market on Outer Loop. You got to get back on Hirschborn, come back through. So I feel like there's really an underserved community in this area that doesn't really have anywhere to go, or all the way over here to Walmart or Kroger to go to some kind of grocery store. So it's kind of just, here we go. Skip one? No. Kind of the theory behind the zoning on this case. So up front, we've got a little bit of commercial, a little over 20,000 square feet over here, 4,000 square feet here with associated parking. Got 125 units in this area, and then another 176 back here. The layout was very deliberate. There are some steep slopes on the site, which is basically where the tree preservation area is, and then there's a ridge that runs more or less this way. So the buildings have been located in alignment with the grades of the land. Same over here. Kind of builds up in this general pattern. And then we have detention facilities here, here, and here. Excuse me. Here's that development now. So that roadway comes through, and then we'll curve around. I think it kind of curves and hits, and we'll come through the property as our second access point. So you can see this is the city of Hollow Tree, which is the older subdivision, and then here's all the new Hirschborn Heights. They've actually go to the next one. This is where the apartments ended up being. They've got these lots still planned, which have not been built yet. Most of these are under construction. I was out there earlier this week. There's probably at least 3 homes under construction right now. So we can see that development is kind of starting to fill in to the east. Here's the plan. So that roadway comes through here, and that is shown. That was part of the approval. It was to provide access to the adjacent site, which is ours. So here's some photos of those apartments. They have very similar density. We have 14.69 units per acre. They have 14.6. And here's the city of Hollow Creek, so you can see kind of older, more traditional, a little bit larger lots. And then here's the new development, Hirschborn Heights. We are preserving 14% of the tree canopy and will fulfill the rest of the 20% requirement with buffering. There's a landscape buffer area required on this side, and then, of course, parking lot trees. We are about 430 feet from the closest single-family residence to the closest proposed building. And then, again, with the connectivity, we do have the roadway that comes through as a private access easement. We talked about how one day that could connect into Ferndale and provide a connection here, and then this is the connection point to the west. And again, just talking about, here's our site. All of these single-family homes can get to the site via the existing infrastructure. Sewers, I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I know one of the adjacent property owners is here and has some interest in where the sewers are going. These are all the sewer easements, so the sewer stops and stubs into our property here, and all of these parcels are on septic currently. So the sewer will be coming through the property to serve these to the east, which is why we have all of these easements that stub over on this side. There was some concern about elevations. Of course, we're at a rezoning and a very conceptual plan at this point, haven't looked at any grades of sewers, and so these are, again, slightly conceptual. We know that we need to have these easements to the east property. They might shift slightly, and MSD has signed off on the plan. And of course, when we get to construction documents, it's possible that the plan will change, and we will look at things closer then. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Questions for the applicant? Chief?
Ashley, what I'd like you to do between now and the public hearing date is run this plan by the fire department over there. You can see over there at that commercial building where you have almost a hairpin
Here.
or U-turn.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes,
Oh, here.
yes, sir.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that may or may not present a struggle for a large fire truck making that turn, and there may need to be some revision to your plan to accommodate that, and I'd rather get all this dealt with at one time rather than you having to come back for a plan change later on.
Got it.
So if you could do that for me, please.
Will do.
Jeff?
Or maybe I need a full-size plan, or can you zoom into the access point on Hirschborn?
Oh, here?
Maybe from the development plan.
Mm-hmm.
Joel. 'Cause
We've got a right, left, and dedicated straight out of the development.
So you show, yeah, that one. You show a left, a right, and a through, and one inbound, and I'm guessing it's not 24 feet that's labeled on the plan for a 30-foot easement.
Yeah, that access, the access easement is
Doesn't-
30 feet, but then the right turn lane and the in, so that maybe, are you saying that access easement needs to be wider at the entrance?
Well, and I don't think 24 feet is the correct dimension.
Oh, no, it's not. That was left over. Those are all 12-foot lanes.
But then I guess my other question would be, do you need the through? Are you
Yeah,
going
now
to
that
build
I
it as if a through may be in
Right.
there and stripe it off?
Well, and that could probably be a straight left because obviously the sound wall is on the other side. Nobody's going straight. Good call.
Okay. So you might update the plan to show the correct dimensions at that area, and then if the easement needs to widen out to accommodate,
All 3 lanes.
plus the sidewalk
Okay.
on the one side, because it looks like you're only doing the sidewalk on the one side.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is the sidewalk on one side reasonable, given that if you're walking down to that commercial, you're going to run out of sidewalk and have to across the parking lot at some point? Maybe that's more
The par-
obvious on a full-size plan, but,
The parking lot to,
yeah, how would you walk to the two commercial buildings from the
from like this way,
apartments?
you would come this way. I have to look at my plan because that's not showing up very well. And then you would have to walk around the 20,000 square foot commercial building. And then, yeah, we probably would need a crosswalk here to tie in on this side. But you would come this way, across, and then around, and then across.
Well, and I was looking at it, if you're coming out of the apartments,
Oh,
on that side, you're
I
coming
see.
down, how do you get to the 20,000 square foot commercial? The sidewalk takes you to
Yes,
the
I think-
smaller one, but,
you would cross over here and walk on this sidewalk. Maybe
okay, you come down which side's the sidewalk
it's
on there?
this side, right here.
The right side.
That's correct.
But when you get down there, how do you get over to the 20,000 square foot?
I think I need a crosswalk, either here or maybe even here might be a better spot.
Okay. Other comments, commissioners, concerns? Anyone else here to speak on this case? I don't have any sign-in sheets for anyone else. Oh, I'm sorry, was that this case? Okay. Anyone here in support or other? We'll move on with opposition. David Dries.
Joel, can you put up that other graphic? Good afternoon. My name's David Dries, and my 17-acre property is located at 5930 South Waterson Trail, 40291, just upstream of the site. So I'm the property outlined in yellow or gold that has Hurstburn Parkway frontage and Waterson Trail frontage as well. So I've supported this rezoning request from the beginning. However, I believe the sanitary sewer easement location is wrong because it's located on a ridge instead of being located in the natural valley serving the watershed. As a result of this, proposed easement location will damage the properties in the 30-acre watershed that's above this site, including my 17 acres. I've been a civil engineer, or I am a civil engineer, but I do not have the sanitary or sewer experience of these engineers and planners. However, common sense tells me that a sanitary sewer that serves an upstream watershed should be located in or near a natural valley. So a natural valley is what's marked in green arrows, kind of running diagonally. The red X is where the connection for the sanitary sewer is now. So the proposed sanitary sewer easement goes up in ridge that sits 20 feet higher than the natural valley, which seems unusual to me. So locating a sewer 15 to 20 feet higher than a valley elevation seems inefficient to me, and of no benefit to anyone upstream. In addition to the proposed easement being located on a ridge instead of a normal location in a natural valley, additional damage will be done to the upstream property since an interior easement about 180 feet south of the Hurstburn Parkway property will be created. So from that red point to get to the east, instead of going up the natural valley that a sewer would ordinarily take, it would have to run up the contour line and kind of cut off the frontage of the neighbor property. That's the Schmidt property where it's marked ridge. That is the drainage way. So the drainage way should be located near the right-of-way line where it would be a natural easement, it'd be a natural drainage easement. The sanitary easement would be nearby and it would accommodate all the properties upstream. I also understand that any sanitary sewer easement needs to be outside the stream buffer area, and that's excellent. However, an easement location in or near the natural valley seems like the common and normal plan, providing the most flexibility of the property. So the elevations here, basically, if you come from Hurstburn Parkway down the property line with a red X on it, Hurstburn Parkway sits up about 20 feet, 15 to 20, high, probably higher than the ceiling, drops down to the valley where the green arrows are, down about where the floor is, and then the sewer that's proposed is another 15 to 20 feet up here instead of being at the bottom of the watershed. So anyway, I'd appreciate if that location be located outside of the stream buffer zone, but somewhere in the valley near the stream. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak? Kent?
Joe, can we put Ashley's plan back up? So. Yeah, right there. So I'll probably get David back up here in a second. So Kent Goody, Mendel Scott and Associates, 5151 Jefferson Boulevard, 40219. So we've been kind of going MSD because Mendel Scott represents David Trees, and so we've been trying to figure out the best way to serve the property. And I think what Ashley and I may have worked out in MSD maybe is to come here and maybe run this easement up a little bit closer to the. We can't run it parallel exactly because of the LBA that's here until this property is rezoned. So if we can hit somewhere in here and then come down and sit, their sewer is down here, so we'd have this easement right here, can come up and hit somewhere probably where this road is, then that might be satisfactory. I know, we don't have enough room in here unless we redesign the plan, and I don't know that the developer would be willing to do that. So food for thought, I guess. We'll see if David. Sorry to do this in front of you, but we hadn't had time. So, well, right there. I mean, if you were right here,
That's probably better than what's proposed now, but that's just going to cause a very deep sewer. So if we go first, we're going to have to build a very deep sewer through this ridge, which I don't know why we would build a sewer through a ridge anyway. I don't know why it helps the applicant. I don't know why it helps MSD. If we go second and they come in, then we're also going to need to build a very deep sewer to connect, because their sewer only goes up to the not very close to the property line. So we have a very deep sewer, and we'd have to tear up their parking lot, come through the middle of their parking lot. So if we go first, we're kind of in bad shape. If we go second, if the sewer line runs down the valley, where the sewer line comes from Preston, comes from Old Shed, comes from Papa Level, comes from Fagan Bush, the whole way it's in the valley to this site. All we have to do is finish it through the valley, like sanitary sewers are done almost all the time. And so anyway, I think it needs to stay. There's a nice valley. It's 20 feet deep and would serve all the properties.
Okay, is MSD here? Tony?
Hi, Joey Ashby, MSD 700 West Liberty Street.
Can you go back to the exhibit Mr. Reeves had up?
So I hope you can see the mouse, but we've already spoken with the applicant about moving the easement location at the property line to about this point right here, which if the sewer line is at minimal depth at that location, the sewer can follow this contour and be down along the stream right there, and it would not require the removal of the stream buffer, which is against the floodplain ordinance. So we we feel that the appropriate location to serve the upstream property is appointed at about right here.
Okay, and so how deep is that sewer going to be that the other property owner would have to deal with?
The sewer could be at minimal depth and just follow the contour all the way down to about 35 feet off the stream. That's about where we would want to permit any additional sewers because we've got to maintain a 25-foot buffer off the stream plus another 10 feet really just to have the room to put the sewer in.
So you're saying that negates the deep cut that he was referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Questions, MSD? Would the applicant like to address that?
Yes, I think what Mr. Dries was commenting about, let's see. Because I like perpendicular lines, I came and turned this sewer, and in doing so, chased the sewer up the hill rather than stayed with the contours. So I'm happy to turn this stub easement and extend it this way, which would therefore lower it. Right now, it would be exiting the site around elevation 631, and it would be more about 615 up this way. I don't know if that would satisfy him, but it would make more sense for the elevations, and as you've heard, MSD is okay with that location as well. So,
Okay. David, do you understand what she's saying? You,
Can I take a second?
yes, come back to the podium.
So it's about three things. I think from what Joey said from MSD, my property, I have an elevation. My low spot's 622. This elevation they're talking about up on the ridge is around the 622, 624. So my low spot is about level, but it's up about 1,000 feet. If it's in the valley, it works beautifully. Again, by putting it up on the ridge, my neighbor Schmidt, they cut an easement so that the drainage is out on the right-of-way. The easement's 180 foot in, so his most valuable part of his property along Hurstburn is hurt. And then third, the sanitary sewer that's
Can you, okay, use the mouse to show us so we can keep it on record.
So this sanitary sewer, if you looked at any of the elevations, this elevation is probably 20 feet higher than this. So I don't even know how that building to get to that sewer, either that sewer's got to be really deep or that building's got to be really high. But that slope is very big. So this sewer back here, if the sewer's out in the valley, that building gets served nicely. That building gets served nicely. And Joey said being in the stream buffer area, we definitely are proposing that we stay out of the stream buffer area. I think it's 25 foot on each side, so there's no proposal to affect the stream buffer area.
Okay. Does the applicant have more they want to say about that?
one more thing, and then I think that will do it. If we were to locate it in the natural valley along this area, we would then have to provide a 15-foot sewer and drainage access easement outside of that stream buffer, therefore push everything 15 feet this way, which that building would have to go away. So I still maintain, and as MSD, that I think these elevations will work if we just kick this easement this way and come out. It would be a little bit higher than this elevation, but I looked at it earlier today, and I think it was a couple feet. So it was, 15 feet, I can understand, but.
So you're talking about the depth is only
That's
a couple
correct.
feet,
Well,
not 15?
yes, up here, yeah, and then this way I'm talking about, we would have to move everything horizontally 15 feet this way, which then we'd have to lose this building, which would obviously be somewhat of a hardship.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Commissioners, we're charged with setting a public hearing. Do you feel like this is ready for a public hearing, or does this need to be worked out further? Jeff?
I'm fine with the public hearing, but I think there's a few things they need to tweak before the meeting.
And, yeah,
Yeah, I sense a willingness amongst all parties to come up with a good solution. So I think between now and whatever hearing that we set up, and I expect it to be a little bit farther out, given holidays and full dockets and everything, they'll have time to do that. So I think setting a date is good.
okay.
August 1st.
Does August 1st give the applicant time to work out these issues with Mr. Dries? Okay, we'll set the public hearing for August 1st then. Sure. All right. Before we take our last case, we're going to take a short break for about 5 minutes, and then we will address the last case on the agenda. Okay, we'll get started again with the last item on our agenda. It's 19SUBDIV1001. It's a request for a major preliminary subdivision plan known as the Breakers at Prospect. The location is 7800 Sutherland Farm Road. Owner is Marjorie McCall, and Joel Dock is the case manager.
Again, Joel Dock, Planning and Design Services staff. This is a major preliminary subdivision for the creation of 72 single-family residential lots on roughly 45 acres of land, resulting in a density of about 1.5 dwelling units an acre. The site is west of U.S. Highway 42, about 1 mile south of the county's northeast boundary. The subject site abuts R4 zoning districts on all 4 sides, 3 of which are developed for single-family subdivisions. On its western boundary, it abuts the Garvin Brown Reserve, which abuts the Ohio River. That's a property owned by the Riverfields, Inc. Two stub roadways enter the property, here and here. Sidewalks are provided throughout the development with sidewalk or walking trail connectivity to adjacent subdivisions. And there's on-site detention and roughly 11 acres of open space. So no action is being requested today of the Land Development Transportation Committee meeting. The original time frame for this project was to be on the Planning Commission public hearing for June 20th. Not all agency approvals had been received in time to get notice out for the June 20th hearing, so we didn't notice for that. Instead, between staff and the applicant, we found it best to put it in front of the Land Development and Transportation Committee first, even though it's not required of a standard R4 subdivision, and at least get out there the technical issues. There's considerable citizen opposition and comments on this project, so we found it might be best to bring it to LD&T, discuss these technical issues, get these possibly resolved, addressed, or otherwise prior to a public hearing. The project has been noticed already for the July 18th public hearing. Staff has received prior to the hearing today a petition for a night hearing, so I imagine we will forego the July 18th public hearing and take up the petition request at the next available LD&T, but today's hearing will not discuss that petition for night hearing. So staff was made aware of some additional concerns on this proposed development by Riverfields and the Louisville Water Company this past Monday, June 24th. The February approval given by the Louisville Water Company was the approval of a plan that did not include the current stormwater and drainage system, specifically infiltration basins that are proposed on the subject site. Given that the water company had approved the project and really most of the outstanding issues were related to MSD with respect to drainage and stormwater. It's typical that drainage and stormwater concerns, detention, capacity is under the authority of the Louisville MSD. So PDS made assumptions that MSD was the appropriate body to handle the review and was not aware that this project was in a wellhead protection zone, and was not aware that any additional review needed to be made by the Louisville Water Company. MSD and Public Works have both approved the project. They approved the project on June 11th of 2019. Wellhead protection zones are not a regulatory mandate of the Land Development Code, so PDS has no purview over wellhead protection. MSD representatives from both MSD and the Louisville Water Company are here to comment on the project and can discuss the technical issues that are involved in this project. There's other technical review items noted, again, that preliminary approval had been received by MSD and Public Works. An evaluation by Red Wing and the Army Corps, so a jurisdictional wetland determination letter has been provided, and that should have been in your Legistar folder. A geotechnical slope evaluation report was provided as the original project included running the stormwater through a private easement through the Riverfields property out to the river. There was some disturbance of slopes in this area, and as we've addressed cases recently that deal with disturbance of slopes and steep slopes for residential, they were required to do a geotechnical slope analysis. They have provided one. It didn't opine that there were any issues with the slope disturbance. However, they've since removed disturbance of those slopes, and they are no longer required to provide any additional geotechnical assessments. They've provided limits of disturbance and building envelopes along lots 1 through 9, and those will be required to be recorded on the record subdivision plat. Additionally, the Harrods Creek Fire Department has reviewed the proposal and ultimately had no objections to the project. You will find your proposed conditions of approval beginning on page 5 and continuing through page 6. Nothing in those subdivision conditions is anything out of the ordinary or anything that we wouldn't expect on a standard R4 single-family subdivision. Are there any questions for staff?
Yes, John.
Joe, you're not asking us to decide on anything today?
No, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. We'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Joel. I'm Pat Dominic, Sayback, Wilson, and Lingo, 608 South 3rd Street, 40202. I am representing the Breakers at Prospect LLC, the developer on this proposal. With me today is Stephanie Gillison in the audience. She is the applicant. She is the developer of this. There's a lot of history here. I think Joel has sort of gone over a lot of that, but I just want to kind of mention up front, it was our intent to give the public as much opportunity as possible to express their feelings about this case, and that was the reason for the sort of dual meeting. So I know we're taking up your time this evening. This afternoon. I sure hope it doesn't get to this evening, but no, I appreciate the attention you're giving to this. It's important. There's a lot of very technical issues that have gone back and forth on this, and I think it's important that you get a thorough understanding of the subject before you. The property, the Breakers at Prospect, as Joel mentioned, is located off of US 42. It's somewhat sandwiched between the Innisbrook subdivision to the north, roughly about 60 homes, and the Sutherland development, which was developed probably almost about 20 years ago, to to the south and to the west of this. The Innisbrook subdivision, I think, was around 2004 or 2005. I might be mistaken on that, but I think that's roughly the time frame. This piece was left vacant. The owner sold this to Mrs. McCall, I think in the 90s. I might be mistaken on that, but so she has resided on this roughly 50-acre property since that time. Let me describe the property to you a little bit. This aerial highlights several of the features. At the top left is the existing residence. It's a beautiful structure. I've got some photos of that. We are preserving that as well as the circular drive that really make up a beautiful estate. Some of the other farm buildings, those will be removed with this development. The access drive, I'll point to that, comes in through here and kind of winds its way, if I can handle this, up to the residence right now. So that access drive will ultimately be eliminated also. And there are the two stub streets that were planned when both Innisbrook and Sutherland were developed, obviously to serve this property. A couple of things I want to get out of the way. The floodplains, as we're near the Ohio River, just wanted to confirm to you that there is a high bluff along the river in this area right through here. And a lot of that lowland, as well as the Garvin Brown Preserve and some of the other properties to the north and south, are all within that 100-year floodplain. Though none of the development, none of the homes, we're not asking for any particular construction permits to occur in the floodplain. Even the proposed 100-year floodplains, which have not yet been adopted, they are on record at MSD. You can look at county-wide, the new mapping, and even under that scenario, there's very little change in the floodplain. So none of the development we're proposing occurs in the 100-year floodplain. This is a rendering of the proposed subdivision plan. You can see the main entrance is off of Sutherland Farm Road. That will extend up to a drive that provides access to the existing estate, upon which we will be developing additional home sites. There are a total of 72 lots on 49 acres, so a density of about 1.47 units per acre. We are constructing a large, about 3.5 acre stormwater retention basin in the middle, and that will be a subject of some more comment as I go through this. But I did want to talk about some of the environmental things that affect the layout. Joel had mentioned the wetland delineation that we did have done on the property. There are a series of jurisdictional wetlands that are located in linear strips, and these are very commonplace along the Ohio River. They're commonplace along the Garvin Brown property, and really up and down. They kind of form these linear strips of land and kind of hollows where hydric soils and vegetation have developed. There's also a beautiful lake. Beautiful, holds water all year round, even in dry periods. So we've got some jurisdictional wetlands here. There's a linear section right here too that's almost along. It's a really ill-defined kind of depression in through there, and we have some more significant wetlands that are located down in the floodplain. Our impacts to those wetlands are relatively minor, less than 0.2 of an acre of the wetlands we intend to disturb. Those are the areas in red. There is a large wetland area right here. This formed almost a drainage corridor prior to the development of Innisbrook and Sutherland. This was sort of a linear drain system that just sort of ran through the landscape. It is our intent to preserve the pond. As many of these, this linear wetland strip here, the wetlands in the floodplain, and a large wetland area down here in the, I guess that's the southwest corner of the property. The brown areas were also identified as wetlands, but the Corps deemed those to be isolated. No permit is required to construct or to impact those wetlands. So the limits of our disturbance are fairly minor, and we can work that through the Corps' nationwide permit program. These are some photos of the residents. I mentioned it's beautiful. It's absolutely spectacular. It's one of the grand estates that you go out that populated the Ohio River corridor, and it's certainly our intent to preserve that. The main issue on this subdivision from the beginning was stormwater management. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the background elements to that. We have extremely flat terrain, somewhere on the order of 0 to 3% slopes. Most of the drainage on the property actually goes to the lake and the wetland areas on the site. Not a lot of it drains off that we can tell. There is, as a result, very limited outfall capacity. When I say that, both the Innisbrook and Sutherland neighborhoods do have outlets that tie into this property. But the downstream, as you go through those neighborhoods, the capacity of that system is really limited. So combine that with the fact that further downstream to the south, there is an existing neighborhood, the Shirley Bass Durock Avenue areas. Those areas have experienced flooding repeatedly. So there are a lot of downstream issues that we had to concern ourselves with. And lastly, very poor surface soils. We have a geotech report, and I can talk about that in a minute, but I have probably about 24 photographs of ponding water in people's yards, and it's true that this surface layer, it's sort of a Robertsville, Scioto soil series, and it's almost plastic, and when it gets wet, it just holds water, and people's yards, just because of the flat terrain, we get a lot of rear yard flooding. So those are the constraints that are on the property. I wanted to talk about our original stormwater proposal that we presented at a January 15th neighborhood meeting. And this was also part of the plan that was originally submitted on February 11th. You can see there's no pond in this version of the plan. There were 10 more lots. And what we looked at the time, and what I was very clear in expressing to the neighbors that night, that our preference would be to take all of our stormwater to the Ohio River. And we had some good reasons, we had some good thoughts that we had a chance to do that. One was a private drainage easement that our property had with Riverfields. When this was originally dedicated, there remained I believe it's a 15-foot drainage easement, and I think there's a 12-foot pipe there. But it was never dedicated to public use. It's a private drainage easement that just served the two bulk properties. There was a second alternative we had that also involved Riverfields and the Garvin Browns Preserve, and that was the thought that, Riverfields, this thing runs right through the middle of your property, and there's a pipe in there. What if we eliminated that, eliminated the pipe, put a new pipe that served our property, put that easement to the north end of the property where, it was more out of the way. It wasn't right smack through the middle of the property. So that was option number 2. And the third option involved an adjoining property owner. All of those, our owner, Stephanie, made very serious proposals to, substantive proposals regarding acquisition of an access easement. In all 3 cases, those offers were rejected. So without an outlet now to the river, we are looking at how to handle our stormwater on site, again without impacting the Innisbrook and Sutherland neighborhoods. So the first part of our stormwater proposal is the 3.5 acre lake that sits in the middle of the property. We are only obligated to provide 3.3 acre feet of storage per MSD's normal detention requirements. We are providing 8.9 acre feet, almost 3 times. We are trying to hold back as much of our stormwater as we possibly can. The lake also provides some amenity value for us and also some water quality benefits that I'll talk about in a minute. The second part of that proposal involved infiltration. We have a lot of experience with stormwater infiltration in Louisville. It's been part of MSD's Green Manual for the better part of 4 or 5 years now, I think. So there have been a lot of projects that have successfully infiltrated stormwater. What we have reserved is after our drainage enters the lake and the sediments and suspended solids and any nutrients that are part of that would be sufficiently diluted, they are discharged by pipe into an infiltration area, and we have a couple of details to talk about how that might work. The geotech report that we got indicated very favorable results. We go down about 20 to 25 feet, and we get a very consistent, almost 20 inch per hour infiltration rate. Those are excellent rates. MSD standard is only a ½ inch per hour, and we have very porous soils along the river. That's almost indicative of the way the water companies on their website, their riverbank filtration even talks about that this is a green approach to potable water supply, in that the sand and gravel in the earth serves as a natural filter. We feel the same way that is going to happen with ours. There are several techniques. We don't want to at this point in time. I think it's premature to settle on this before we have road grades and inlet structures and everything established. But one option is what we call a perforated manhole, which is a manhole where we have an intake pipe from the lake. The bottom will allow the water to filter out slowly, and we'll have a pipe and then another connected inlet and then another connected inlet, and it's sort of a system that allows the stormwater we're collecting to access the fine sand and gravel subgrade. The second item's a lot more. The second option we have is to do an infiltration basin, and we've done more of these downtown in urban conditions than we have in subdivisions, frankly. These involve a lot more disturbance. We're actually excavating a deep pit, if you will, that gets down to that sand and gravel layer. We backfill with stone and then restore the surface grade. So you don't see anything on the surface, but the water is allowed to infiltrate in there and again gradually dissipate. I did want to talk about the wellhead protection zones, because this is what was discovered after we had MSD's approval and Public Works approval, and is what has created so much interest over the last week or so. We are about 3/4 of a mile from one of the wellheads. We are in an area 2B, and I believe, and the water company can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that 2B zone is defined as a 10-year migration, where something entering the surface at that point in time will take about 10 years to get to that wellhead. These are our water quality commitments. we expect to work very closely with MSD and the water company and any other state departments that need to sign off on this. But it's important to note that every time we've done an infiltration feature like this, we have some level of pre-treatment, what we call pre-treatment, where the water is somehow treated before it goes into the subgrade. The pond is a beautiful source of pre-treatment in that we allow the suspended solids and sediments to filter out. We allow any nutrients that enter the system to be sufficiently diluted. Above and beyond that, we're prepared to offer deed restrictions that limit harmful herbicides, fertilizers, and pesticides, and to have that become part of the HOA documents that would affect any of the purchasers. And in fact, this is very similar to a restriction that was placed on the rear of Sutherland lots that abut the Garvin Brown Preserve. We expect to enter into a long-term maintenance agreement with MSD. The HOA will do that, and that will include monitoring both volume controls to make sure that the runoff is actually being contained on site, and also that the water quality aspects of our features are working properly. We need to work with the agencies on this. I freely admit that at this point in time. The plan does have MSD and Public Works approval. This did catch the water company by surprise, and for that, I apologize for that. We apologize for that. But we feel we have a very solid plan. We think we put something together, a neighborhood that based on the houses that we're doing, these houses are going to fit in beautifully with what Innisbrook and Sutherland have, and it's an excellent use of the property. And lastly, we will be asking your approval of this subdivision plan for 72 lots on 49 acres. We have no variances or waivers, and the zoning is appropriate for what we want to do. Are there any questions?
Questions? No? Okay. Kay Ball with the Louisville Water Company.
Would you prefer MSC to go first? Okay. Do you need it zoomed in or anything? Sure. And they all have copies as well.
Hi, it's Kay Ball, Louisville Water Company, 550 South 3rd Street. As you can see by this drawing, this development is within the wellhead protection area. And on this drawing, you can see the line that depicts the tunnel, and then the dots are the actual collector wells. Now, the wellhead protection plan is mandated by EPA, and the whole purpose of that is to protect the groundwater supply and the contributing area of that water supply. So this delineation in this wellhead protection area is delineated by using real data, your pumping data, your drawdown data, your geology in the area. And so it's a modeling effect to say this is where the area that is contributing to the wells, to the water supply system. So that said, Louisville Water Company will always be concerned about anything that will contribute to the public health of the water public supply. It's our responsibility to make sure that we protect the water supply. We just recently found out about the changes in the stormwater treatment and how that's going to be handled. And at this point, we don't have plans. We don't know what's really going to happen there. And we need time to look at that and evaluate the process. We need our water quality folks and our engineers to look at that plan and devise it. Yes, this is being used in other areas, but it's not a wellhead protection area. In fact, the Division of Water has stated that they know of no other type of this well, injection well, within a wellhead protection area. So we all need time to figure this out. And we would hope with EPA and Division of Water, they are the regulatory agencies where EPA is primacy in this case, but we would expect that the developer and the design team will work with these regulatory agencies to make sure that we protect the water supply. You have any questions?
You say you need time to evaluate what's being proposed. Are you talking that this would be a matter of days, matter of weeks, matter of months,
Well, we
matter
need
of
a
years?
plan first. They do not have a plan. We saw some examples of something that they can use. We need to know what they are planning to install. So we need to have a design, a final design, so we can evaluate that. Right now, we don't know.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. David Johnson, MSD.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. David Johnson, representing the Metropolitan Sewer District at 700 West Liberty Street. I'll just give you a briefing of what we've worked with the developer on. As Pat pointed out, when they originally came with the plan, we had all intentions of this drainage going directly to the river, and that's really where we wanted it to go. We just thought that was the best solution. Mr. Dominic worked with some adjoining property owners, Riverfields, and the adjoining property owner, and was unable to obtain proper easements to allow that water to go directly to the river. So they went back to the drawing board. They came back to us and said, well, we've got these outlet pipes that go that leave from our site in different locations rather than directly to the river. And we expressed some concern about that. As he pointed out, the people down on Bass Shirley and Duroc Avenue, they have extensive flooding issues down there. We're very well aware of that, and we've actually developed a very preliminary design to help eliminate some of that flooding, but due to funding issues, we're not able to build that one at this time. It's about $1 million project, so we cannot construct that project. So when Pat came in, I explained that, hey, we got these issues downstream, and he came in and said, well, we'll maximize our detention on site, which they have, as he noted. They're required about 3 point something acre feet of storage, and they're actually providing nearly 9. So it's about 2.5 to 3 times the normal requirement for runoff volume on site. Even with that, I said I still am concerned about the folks downstream. I have great concerns about the flooding down there. So once again, he went back to the drawing board, came back and said, you know, we think we have some good soils under the ground here. We're going to get some geotech work done. And we agreed to that because infiltration is a practice that we've used many times. We use it on capital projects. We use it on private development. Most notably, Churchill Downs did a very large infiltration basin on their site. We've used some in Portland. So other areas, I do agree with Kay completely. We've never done this in a wellhead protection area. And obviously, any requirements that the water company or any local, state, or federal agency has as it relates to putting this water into the well protection area will require that those requirements be met and all permits gathered before we'll issue any kind of construction approval as far as that goes. But what we've done is we've asked Pat to look at the drainage and try to detain the 100-year storm volume on site, and they've been able to do that. Through the use of that big pond that you see on site and the use of the infiltration basins, they're able to contain a 100-year storm event on site. Personally, from our past experience with some other projects, we believe that it'll probably do more than that. We think it'll actually hold up water for even larger events. And what this ultimately means is that the drainage system downstream will actually be improved with this working. So we're going to put flow monitors at the pipes that go into Sutherland to monitor those flows. Those monitors take data every 15 minutes. They'll send it to a system at MSD, and we can look it up on our computer screens to see if there's any flow actually leaving this site. We are requiring a long-term maintenance agreement with the what would be the homeowners association here, that they would have to maintain those infiltration basins. We're also requiring that all of this be bonded so that we can make sure that everything is functioning. If they get to a construction phase, that it's functioning throughout the development of the project and even a little bit of the term after that in maintenance. So we have worked extensively, and I can tell you, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and this is probably as a detailed stormwater management plan that we've done on a private development job, and we have never required a 100-year flow containment on site for volume control. So with that, unless you have any other questions, we've approved the plan and we support that, and we also support where the water company's coming from as far as protecting the wellhead protection area. And like I said, and I'll say it again, is that until all permits are gathered at the local, state, and federal level, we will not issue any kind of construction approval on this project.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with the others in support. Tom Halbig.
Pardon me, I did not check the support box.
That's okay. You're the only one that's other. We'll start with that.
All right, thank you. My name is Tom Halbig. I'm 400 West Market Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. I'm counsel for Riverfields. As Mr. Dominic indicated, Riverfields owns the Garvin Brown Preserve, which separates this property from the Ohio River. We have had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Gilazon, the developer, and Mr. Dominic a number of times, and appreciate their efforts to work through our concerns. Riverfields is a land conservancy that focuses its efforts within the Ohio River corridor, and this development is of concern to it. We've been very interested recently in Mr. Dominic's proposal for these water injection wells, particularly the prospect for relieving some of the flooding in the neighborhoods downstream, the James Taylor and Jacob School neighborhoods, and Riverfields is enthusiastic about that. Riverfields' concern at this point, it really arises from a lack of available information. After meeting with Ms. Gilazon and Mr. Dominic, we began our own research, and when we contacted the water company, were unable to obtain any kind of analytical work on the impact of having the stormwater flowing directly into a point 20 to 25 feet below the surface of the ground, where it's presumably going to pass through the strata at a higher velocity than the 10 and 5-year thresholds that define the areas within the wellhead protection area established by the Louisville Water Company. Our primary request here is that you defer any action on this and defer public hearings on this until the water company has time to complete its analytical work to determine the impact of the injection of the stormwater into the ground, and to take appropriate action and to develop the analyses that we will hope to then request from them and provide meaningful input at a public hearing as to whether this is helpful or not helpful. So that's my request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, we'll take the other. Go ahead.
The Garvin Brown Reserve, where is it on that map?
Use the mouse, please, to show us.
So I believe this is the site, and the Garvin Brown Preserve is from about here over to about here. It's this area, and it is if you follow the easternmost property boundary of the property that the yellow line down to the river, that's also the Garvin Brown property line.
How many acres is it? You know?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Walker. Okay. Stephanie Gilderzan?
I am the developer.
Please come to the microphone before you talk so we can get, and start with your name and address.
Stephanie Gillison, 5964 Timber Ridge Drive, Prospect, Kentucky. I'm the developer, and if you had any questions for me, I'm happy to answer anything.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Don Grader? Do you have a question you want to ask from the podium? Okay. Lynn Dowling? Okay, is there anyone else to speak in support or other on this? All right, we'll move to those opposed. Randy Strobo.
Good evening. My name is Randy Strobo, 239 South 5th Street, Suite 917, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. My law firm represents the Sutherland Community Association, that is the HOA for the Sutherland subdivision. So a lot of what we wanted to say was already been said, so I'll just piggyback off of what the Louisville Water Company stated and also what River Fields has stated. We are concerned primarily with this new project, with this new stormwater injection well that is being proposed. We just don't know a lot of information about it. On top of that, you know, your comp plan, let's see. Requires you all to, or the Planning Commission, to be concerned about groundwater, and specifically in Section 4.5, Provision 18, the comp plan states that you're required to protect groundwater resources by controlling the types of activities that can occur within established wellhead protection areas. It goes on to say that you must also identify the extent of existing groundwater use and the impacts of the project on groundwater resources, flow patterns, and existing and proposed surface drainage. So that's what your comp plan says. That's the 2040 Cornerstone Plan. Unfortunately, there's big gaps in your land development code. Your land development code does not reflect this obligation that the City of Louisville and the Planning Commission has to protect groundwater resources. In fact, wellhead protection areas are not mentioned once in your land development code. So before we move forward on a project like this, which was stated by both the Louisville Water Company and the Louisville MSD, that this has never been done before, right? This is something new, and we recognize that. But sometimes, you know, these things come up, and we recognize there's gaps. So before we make any decisions regarding this project, if it remains the same, we think that the City of Louisville and the Planning Commission needs to develop some regulations on this. Like I said, wellhead protection area is not mentioned anywhere in the land development code. There are some things related to sinkholes and things of that nature, which are similar, but not really. So we think it's imperative that before we make any decisions on this, the City of Louisville and the Planning Commission needs to take action to adopt procedures and policies to be able to appropriately and adequately analyze and evaluate projects such as this. And we saw that already with this project. There was some confusion on whether or not the Louisville Water Company needed to take a look at this again. They did not take a look at this again until River Fields, in fact, informed them of it. So if River Fields did not inform them of this new project, we wouldn't be here talking about it today. The Sutherland Community Association, their president, Steve Sowers, is going to be speaking after me, and he'll have a little bit more to say about some of the stormwater flooding events that they've experienced over time. But we are still worried about this project, even if it is constructed the way that MSD likes, that MSD seems to think, and we've met with MSD, they've been great with us, they've been meeting with us about this project when we've asked for meetings, and they've been pretty transparent. But we still have concerns because this is a pretty complicated stormwater project, and it requires a lot of oversight, and like Mr. Johnson said, a lot of oversight of the HOA. So I don't know. I'm sure you all have plenty of experiences with HOAs, and some are great, but some are not great, and some only exist on paper. I just got a phone call the other week of a resident, not related to any of this, who just found out after living in a neighborhood for 10 years that she actually has an HOA, and that the HOA is now going to form. So I'm not saying that this will happen here, but we all know that HOAs can be very unreliable, and it's problematic for the Southern Community Association, who has a very active HOA, to have to deal with a problem if the new development's HOA is not meeting when they're supposed to be meeting, if they're not monitoring, maintaining, and operating the stormwater project the way they're supposed to be, pursuant to whatever memorandum of agreement they have with MSD. So that's a major concern that we have. And also, we think it's great that MSD is taking the step to require retention of up to the 100-year flood event, but they've had a couple, 2 or 3 100-year flood events in this area of Jefferson County in the past 4 or 5 years. So we have concerns about that. The project, and I know this is not within the purview of the Planning Commission, but the project is situated on a property that has a lot of issues. And those issues are reflected by the number of federal and state permits they're going to be required to get in order to build this project. That includes permits under the Clean Water Act, Section 404 permits, which you all are probably familiar with. The Army Corps of Engineers are required to give those. Section 402 permits, which are pollutant discharge permits, especially during construction. Chapter 151 of the Kentucky statutes, stream water construction permits potentially. They have to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, the Safe Water Drinking Act, and especially the Underground Injection Control System program for the Safe Water Drinking Act, which would classify, as far as we can tell, again, we don't have details about this project, but would classify, as far as we can tell, this project as a Class 5 injection well. Class 5 injection wells have primacy, as the Louisville Water Company stated, with the U.S. EPA. The state of Kentucky only has primacy over Class 2 injection wells, and it has nothing to do with this, but those injection wells are for gas and oil recovery. So this would be a federal jurisdiction over this particular well. And there also may be some local floodplain permitting that's required for this project. And I say all that because not that you all have responsibilities for issuing those permits, but because it just shows the nature of this property, and that the federal government, the state government are going to have to look at this property very, very carefully in order to approve the construction of this development. The same should be said for local government, the city council, and the planning commission. Well, the planning commission here. So we just implore you all as a planning commission to make sure that you review this project the way it should be reviewed. And that's hard right now because the LDC says nothing about wellhead protection areas, even though your comp plan requires you to evaluate it. So again, we would request that before you make any decisions on this project, that this type of situation, if it arises again, has the proper procedures and policies for the Planning Commission to properly evaluate it, and currently it does not. The remaining issue I just want to mention, and Mr. Dock mentioned this, we did file, Sutherland Community Association obtained over 450 signatures to hold a public hearing in the evening at a more convenient location. We have proposed Kentucky Country Day School as that location, and we would request that this committee either remand the hearing on July 18th and have that hearing at a more convenient location in the evening with enough time for the Louisville Water Company and all the other stakeholders to have time to properly evaluate this project. Thank you. And
thank you. Stephen Stowers?
My name is Steve Stowers, 7001 Wyndham Parkway in Sutherland, Prospect, Kentucky 40059. Madam Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for your time. I'm going to be brief today. A lot of what I wanted to cover, I think, has been covered, but just a couple of things that I want to point out. My wife and I built in Sutherland in 1995, not that that's germane to this discussion, but you can see this picture, actually Wyndham Parkway, which is the main kind of oval through the neighborhood, stopped right at in front of our lot. Our lot's not on the left, but on the right. So this is our lot. We literally back up to the farm. At that point, it looked like I actually had a pasture was part of my lot, but the circle there is the post for the property line. There were no fences at all. Then this is the back part of the property line where the posts are. And I want to roll forward here in just a minute. But when we bought our lot, these are the original drawings that were prepared by NTS, the developer, and the engineering firm, Sayback, Wilson, and Lingo. And so I did some due diligence when we bought the lot. I was a little nervous about floodplain and all, so I confirmed that we were not in a floodplain. And NTS, the developers, confirmed that their engineering firm had designed excuse me, the drainage system for including storm sewers and grates as kind of a standard drainage features for that neighborhood. Unfortunately, now after almost 25 years, the system's not working. And I'm going to show you just a few examples of that. Unfortunately, it's not just the issues with Sutherland, but it's, like we talked about before, it's the Taylor neighborhood, which would include Duroc, Bass, Shirley, and Jacobs School. So let's roll forward now. These are some current pictures. Some of these back up to the existing farm property, some don't. But these are just multiple recent rains, lots of standing water, backyards, excuse me, backyards mostly shown here. But this is interesting. This is 2015 in February. This is Wyndham Parkway right in front of my street, or right in front of my house. About 4 or 5 feet of water there, where basically the water was not going into the storm sewers, it was coming out of the storm sewers. Different angle. And then this one, no cars there, but that's even more flooding in 2018. Obviously, there are issues. Now, as part of the Southern development of 300 homes, there is this, which looks fairly nice, little 4 or 5 foot ditch that goes from the eastern part of Sutherland all the way to the west. The fence there up in the very top of the picture separates Sutherland property from the houses and condos on Duroc, which is the first street west of Sutherland. So that's a nice sunny day like today. Let's roll forward a couple weeks ago. That's the same creek, same angle, different picture. So then we roll forward. These are some photos from the Taylor, Jacobs School neighborhoods, fairly recently taken. Clearly, MSD understands that there are issues there, and let me keep moving. Now, the challenge, I guess, is back in April, I had emailed our Metro Council representative, sending some of these photos and asking for some help. Where can we go? Because we were informed in meetings with those folks. We've been working very closely with Mark Jackson and the other folks in that 4th Street neighborhood. And the response that I got back was basically what Mr. Johnson from MSD said, is that they have a planned solution for this neighborhood. It's their critical repair and replacement plan that includes a new pipe for up to 100-year rain event under Bass Road, some regrading, and some other processes. The problem is there's no funding. The cost is between $800,000 and $1 million. And so it basically has just been put on hold, unfortunately. Our concern is that we've got issues already. And we've got what almost seems to be a little bit of an experimental plan of drainage being proposed for this farm development. So you're adding 72 more homes, fairly densely laid out. And our concern is we're never really going to know for sure if we're going to have more problems after this until it's built. And that's our concerns, and thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
John Clark.
I don't have a PowerPoint. John Clark, 6823 Wyndham Parkway, Prospect, Kentucky, 40059. The previous 8 years, I've been president of the Sutherland Community Association prior to Steve taking over. And I just wanted to go on the record saying that we have had many, many conversations with MSD about our drainage system there. It's an open ditch drainage system, partially, as Steve pointed out, that does overflow its banks quite frequently. And I have had many conversations and walked that ditch with Robin Farrell of MSD, who's long since retired, I think. But we walked it all the way over to Duroc to a blue line stream, and basically he said there's nothing we can do. So that's kind of where we left it with them. But I view the drainage system the current drainage system in Sutherland as being very substandard. And as Steve mentioned, it was the Sayback Lingo and Wilson were the engineers for Sutherland when it was developed in 1992. So the development of Sutherland has negatively affected the Taylor neighborhood since it was completed. And I think Mark Jackson will speak to that later on in this meeting. But we feel very badly about that and are trying to work with them to develop whatever kinds of plans we can to help alleviate the negative effects that the construction of Sutherland has had on that historic neighborhood. Another concern we have is about the additional traffic that might be generated when we connect at Eads Place. We met with Joel, and he said the stubs are there and that the Planning Commission would recommend that they're connected. We have a closed loop in Sutherland now. We have two entrances, US 42 and off of River Road. So if we connected Eads to 71 plus 65 in Innisbrook, that could add another 544 cars past my house and Steve's house on a daily basis, depending on how many trips people make. That would be two cars per household, 2 trips per day. So we feel like that they'll use it as a cut through to River and will increase traffic on Wyndham Parkway significantly. One other thing that's been mentioned was, and it's on the condition on the plat, is that the HOA of the breakers would take over the management of the drainage systems. They're building 2 underground storage infiltration systems at the back of the property that will abut Sutherland. We have no idea what kind of construction those will be. MSD staff has characterized this whole drainage system as experimental, and I think you could verify that with MSD. Also, when passing that to an HOA, I wanted to mention that too. Having been president of Sutherland, I would not want to take that on. It's very complex, and it will be, I guess, monitored by the EPA because of the wellhead protection area. So as a HOA board member, I would not want to take on that liability. So in closing, I would urge you to give the Louisville Water Company the time they need to assess this project and how it affects the wellhead protection area. So if you could, push it back and give them some additional time, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Matthew David.
Good afternoon. Matthew David, 6925 Wyndham Parkway, Prospect, Kentucky, 40059. We pull back up the aerials here. So I wanted to just show a few details about the property that you may not know. Right here it was an old railroad. Oops, sorry. That was built back in the late 1800s. That railroad was the original railroad that fed Prospect, made Prospect what it is today. It was supposed to go out towards Westport Road and finish at Westport Road, so Prospect would actually have been built out near Tinseltown if that had happened. That railroad became a dam for this wetland. Sorry, I'm not getting the mouse here. There we go. For this wetland right here. So that wetland has developed over the course of over 100 years. That wetland, of course, feeds the aquifer as well as the other wetlands within this property. So the ecosystem that's been developed here was established over 100 years ago. They're going to talk about how they can mitigate that and how they're going to change the drainage. But ultimately, they are going to impact the aquifer no matter how they construct on this site. That aquifer is, of course, next to the Garvin Brown Preserve, our wetlands that feed our clean water for over there at the wellhead. What they proposed with the injection wells could lead to soil stability issues. I want to make you. I'm sure you're aware of the impacts from the blasting that happened from when they did the tunnel work. Those impacts have. I don't believe there's been any studies to properly assess the impacts from that. There were homes that were damaged within this corridor from that, and there may be some reconsolidation that needs to occur within the ground after those impacts happened. Those are basically mini seismic events that took place within this corridor. This is my first time going through this process. I would, as a professional engineer, I would like a few more information as far as what kind of lead requirements they're meeting. I haven't been able to tell from their drawings or anything that they've submitted what kind of attention that they've given to the lead requirements. My understanding is that Sabec Wilson Lingo says they are a lead certified engineering firm, but I have not been able to see that they are putting due diligence towards that. Also, I haven't been able to see the infiltration coefficient. I know that they had. I know that the city went through a lot of trouble to reestablish that infiltration coefficient, and I have not seen any drawings where they have set that forth and for the new design. They did talk about the issues with draining towards the river. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. I don't think that Memphis would be happy to know that we're taking 49 acres of impervious runoff and heading it straight towards the river. So there hasn't been any good ideas that I've seen from this designer or developer for how to deal with the issues of this landlocked parcel. Based on what I've seen throughout the world in my construction experience, and I have seen many different types of environments, whether it be desertous or deciduous or anything else, that the different types of communities that get developed And I can tell you that there's a lot of issues with this property that I don't think it should be zoned what it is. I think now that we understand the issues about this property, the drainage, the soil stability, the traffic, the conservation of river fields next to the property, the location of the wellhead. I think now that all these things have been put in or have been assessed, that the city should take a look at rezoning this property to not allow this many homes to be built. One more thing I'd like to address. The designer said that we had plenty of time to address any of the concerns. I'd like to show you this wetland here that I talked about earlier, right here. On the original design that was shown at the initial public meeting, he did not show that wetland. The wetland is sort of special because there's trees that have grown up in that wetland that house wood ducks. And even the designers and that mitigate and create wetlands will tell you that those wood duck nests are very difficult to reconstruct. They have to be maintained, and I don't know if you're looking at the plan right now. They do have houses that are. It's this area right here, and sorry, right here, and they do have houses that they plan to build on there. So not only do they plan to build on hydric soil, but they also plan to destroy those wood duck nests, that grove of wood duck nests. I say this again. I feel like because they did not show that wetland at the initial public meeting, that they did intend to deceive the public, that they did not want to deal with the ecological concerns. And while I know that those sometimes are not exact science, I do feel like if they had properly shown that to the public would not have been, it would have been yet another concern for the public. The property for this injection well, they did 2 borings, and I can tell you that my experience with geotech and this site in general, they would probably want to do 30 or 40 borings to actually understand what's in the subgrade, the aquifer, and give us a proper picture of what is actually there. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Mark Jackson?
My name is Mark Jackson. I'm the president of James Taylor Jacob School Neighborhood. We are here because we are downstream of.
Could you give us your address, please?
7700 River Road, Prospect, Kentucky 40059.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because we are downstream, I've been in the area since 1962. I've seen the changes taking place out in the Prospect area when we didn't have the water issues we had until the Sutherlands were built, and it was all natural water flow. Now we're getting flooding through our area, as everybody on the opposing and MSD and the water company has also said that there are some issues with our drainage. And before anything is got approved, as far as I am concerned with our neighborhood, is to really look at the downstream water flow. With the climate change like it is, things are getting wetter, and the prospect of us being more drowned in water and with the drainage, with more concrete and asphalt and houses being built, which would affect the Sutherlands first, which also would affect us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speaker forms I have. Is there anyone else here to speak on this case? Okay. We have no action today. Are we going to leave this public hearing date open till you've resolved the night hearing request?
Yeah, so we have a petition for a night hearing. So at this point, the July 18th public hearing has already been properly noticed and docketed. So at the next LD&T meeting, which would be the next opportunity to take up the petition for night hearing, the LD&T will consider the date and scheduling of that public hearing.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners? Jeff?
Joel, I guess this was in the back of his packet. These are the petitions for the night hearing. There was part of the package. I don't know if somebody handed it out today.
Yeah, the one that he provided today.
Because a lot of these reference this as a rezoning. So I don't know how he presented that to the public, but it says on these petitions that this is not a rezoning, correct?
Yeah, this is not a rezoning.
Okay.
The ordinance doesn't specifically say that only.
But the
zoning.
petition that they signed did reference it as a rezoning on a lot of these sheets.
Yeah, it says we, the undersigned, hereby petition the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing at 6 p.m. or later at a convenient location for case 19SUBDIV1001, current zoning R4 zoning district, to allow the breakers at
They
Prospect.
all don't say current zoning though. Some say
Some
a
say the
rezoning
rezoning.
to, and some say a current zoning.
Like sheet 9, for instance.
Oh yeah, I see that on one of those pages, a rezoning to R4 zoning district. Again, that's a matter that I think the LD&T will have to take up on the 11th. So we haven't been given time to review the petition, confirm the addresses. Again, the requirements for signatures would be 300 or more individuals within the council district or the adjoining district for public hearings set by the Planning Commission.
Okay, we'll take it up on the next LD&T meeting, which is the
11th.
11th of July.
Is the wellhead issue going to be resolved between now and then, or are we still going to be?
I mean, that federal, state, water company, MSD, those are all permits that they'll obtain after the preliminary approval. It's not something we would deal with this early in the process.
So that's not really a concern for what we're going to do?
No. I mean, they certainly understand the technical issues that will be involved to redevelop this property, but all the federal, state, and local permits are still required. But that's something that will require a level of detail that they will get into after if a preliminary approval is granted. I don't think this is stuff we can resolve before preliminary approval, just because they haven't done the amount of design work that would be required to meet those requirements. Does that make sense, Chief?
Yeah, it does. So really, we're not. That's a later on thing as compared to something that needs to be in place before we.
Because if they can't meet the wellhead protection requirements, they just won't.
They won't get any
site
permits.
disturbance permits. No.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a matter of whether or not it's regulatorily required or whether or not we place it as a condition. That prerequisite for recording the plat, which is already a prerequisite to recording the plat, is that they have approvals from the Louisville Water Company, they have approvals from LG&E, they have approvals from Cable, they have approvals for all the utility agencies. So nothing can go to record until all of those construction plans and design approvals have been received by all of the applicable agencies.
So what's going to happen between now and July 11th?
So on July 11th, when the petition is considered for a public hearing before the Planning Commission, I would suggest that the Land Development and Transportation Committee consider in scheduling that public hearing date that the water company has indicated that they have adequate time to review the preliminary plan.
Okay.
So,
So
LD&T will
that's
take
where-
up the matter of timing for Louisville Water Company at the next LD&T meeting. Otherwise, the public hearing was already set.
Are you going to cancel that 18th, or is it going to remain
Not until the
11th? Until action on the 11th,
Correct.
it still remains.
Correct.
So the only reason why we can't address that today is because the water company has not preliminarily approved this plan?
Address what? The scheduling date?
Yes.
Well, the process for a major preliminary subdivision would, for a standard R4 subdivision, as you know, would simply be a meeting of LD&T. We thought, given the public interest on this project and the possibility that any LD&T decision would ultimately be appealed to the Planning Commission, that
Yes.
the most appropriate course of action would be to put it in front of a full body of the Planning Commission.
Yes, sir.
In missing that June 20th date for deadline to get MSD approval, we thought, given the amount of technical issues and technical elements of this plan, as well as the considerable citizen comment on this project, we'd put it on today's LD&T meeting. We wouldn't ask for any LD&T action on the project unless you all choose to take action, if you so desire. But we thought we would air these technical issues. I think the Louisville Water Company has come and spoken to those issues. MSD has spoken to those issues. The downstream folks in Jacob School have spoken to those issues, and representatives from Sutherland have spoken to those issues. So I think the applicant, as well as the members of the Planning Commission, are here today, have a preliminary idea of what those issues are, and know what needs to be addressed moving forward.
But I still, I guess I'm getting old and feeble-minded. I don't understand what we would be doing July the 11th that we cannot do today.
Well, you haven't gone through this petition yet
So,
for a night
yeah, so the
hearing,
petition
right?
was received today. So we're not considering this petition today because I don't know whether it's a valid petition.
Okay,
I'm
That's what we're
sure
gonna
it
do on
is
the
a valid
11th.
petition.
I got you. I'm
Yeah.
good.
But we can't do anything with the petition. We can't schedule public hearing dates until we individually go through. So what we do is we individually go through each sheet. We confirm that the address associated with each signature is within the council district or the adjoining council district.
That I do understand.
Okay. Does that answer Foley?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anything else, commissioners? We'll leave it for the agenda on the 11th of July.
Correct.
Correct?
Do we need to do something like continue this to?
No, because ordinarily when we would get a petition, so we would have a public hearing date set, so July 18th. If we would have received this petition within the required 14-day period, we would simply put it on a business session of LD&T to consider a public hearing date and the petition. So nothing needs to be done to continue it. It would simply, if we hadn't have received this today and we receive it tomorrow, we're still putting on the July 11th LD&T meeting for consideration.
Okay.
Okay. Patrick, would you like to speak?
Just very quickly, and I appreciate everybody showing up this afternoon and expressing their concern over the development. But there was an email that was distributed yesterday that had a lot of information in it, and a lot of it was inaccurate. And I've heard
Distributed to who, from whom?
it was, I think it originally started with Riverfields, I think, and was distributed. There's a lot of emails that were floated
To the
around.
community, not to
Yes,
us, right?
to the
Okay.
public. And with all due respect to Mr. Strobo and Tom Hallbleib, who's a friend of mine, I've worked with Tom many years, the term injection well is a pejorative. And it requires a Class 5 injection well requires EPA permits to do that. We're very familiar with what a Class 5 injection well is, and nothing that we're doing associated with this project is classified or will be classified as a Class 5 injection well. I just wanted to get that on the record. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Yes. I'm sorry, the applicant gets the last word. Are we going to open this up again? Oh, public hearing. Is that it? All right, we'll save it for the public hearing then. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.